Welcome to Subtle Propaganda. I'm Drew, coming to you live from the volcano that will one day destroy us all. Joining me is Three Circles Mike, who has no idea what a Venn diagram is, Integrity Joe, who's late in light, and Rob. We will be talking about pop culture, world news, politics, military culture, fight videos, and the general state of the union. Are we charlatans? I don't know. You decide. Oh, and remember, like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends, and don't forget to tell us how wrong we were in the comments.
Hey everybody, welcome back. What's going on? We are live right now to drink some whiskey with my very good friend Lester. So Mike, Drew, welcome back. Everybody out there in the world who's listening. So let's turn it over to Lester. Let's hear a little bit about this. We got a big whiskey tasting set up for tonight, so let's talk about it.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? So, yeah, my name's Lester, and I've been a pretty big whiskey aficionado / connoisseur here the last 5 or 6 years. And my ADHD has gotten me to the point where I have over 200 bottles at home. So I'm certainly, I'm not a pro, but I've got a developed palate, and I really like sharing my whiskeys. So today we're gonna do a whiskey tasting where we're gonna taste through a couple different types of bourbon variants. We're gonna try a wheated bourbon. We're gonna do a low rye and a high rye mash bill. Then we're gonna try some craft whiskeys that are lesser known, but they definitely are worth trying. And we'll end off with something a little sweeter, just because it's always tricky towards the end when your palate starts getting blown. So something sweeter is really gonna pop off the tongue after having 5 or 6 whiskeys. So I'm just here to spread the gospel of whiskey.
You got to tell them about the argon.
The argon.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. Drew will love this. Drew will love it.
Yes. So I use inert gas to displace the oxygen in my whiskey bottles because, people could look at my whiskey collection or my whiskey stash and consider me an alcoholic. But if I truly was an alcoholic, there wouldn't be any whiskey there to see, right? So I don't drink it as fast as I purchase it. So in order to keep them from oxidizing too much and kind of losing all the character that you want out of them, you use argon gas to displace the oxygen, right? Because it's heavier than oxygen is. So yeah, that's what I do.
That's what I get for not knowing anything about the fucking periodic table of elements.
I know the noble gas.
Awesome. I had no idea.
Yeah, dude. Inert noble gases.
Yeah,
I'm sure argon's probably the cheapest one you can get.
So often, no, actually, it's actually one of the more expensive ones. I think it's one of the heaviest, actually. So
okay.
Most of the knockoffs that you can get off of Amazon and stuff, like the private reserve label and stuff you can buy, it's gonna predominantly have nitrogen in it, and then it'll have a little bit of argon so that they can say it's argon, inert gas. But it's really just mainly nitrogen. So I can get like pure argon gas, which is considerably more expensive.
Right.
So yeah, but I do notice the difference. Some whiskeys taste better after they air out a little bit, and other whiskeys just taste exactly right at a certain point, and you just want to try to keep it like a time capsule where it'll just keep drinking that way. So when you have that instance, there's 2 things you can do. You can decant, right? So that means you can put it into a smaller vessel so that there's less oxygenation going on, or you can spray it with some argon.
How often would you have to do that to
every time I pour?
Okay. Wow.
Every time I pour, unless it's not drinking right? Because I can play with it, right? So if I'm drinking something and I just opened it, and it's got a closed nose, so to speak, so I'm not getting much out of the nose, and then when I'm drinking it, I'm not getting all the flavors that I think I should be getting out of something of that price range or what have you, then I'll just let it air out, and I'll sometimes let it sit there for a couple months before I come and revisit it. So like a perfect example of that was for me, Maker's Cask Strength, right, which is a wheated bourbon, and it was it should have been punching above its weight, and when I tried it, I was like, this is kind of closed off, so I just put it on the shelf for a couple months, and it tasted amazing after that. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's some detail. That's
exactly,
some
dude.
detail.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe the argon thing. I was like, holy shit.
So do you have like
some
different whiskeys or whatever, like in those different stages of like, all right, this one's got like 2 more months left, and this one's got a couple weeks. Like you just have them all like written down, or do you just like can remember them?
No, yeah, I just kind of remember them. And it's I've got ADHD also when it comes to flavors, so like I'm always attacking different things. Of the 200 bottles I have roughly 40 open at any given time, right? And it's a gambit, right? It's bourbon, it's different types of scotches, it's rye whiskeys predominantly. Those are the big three for me, and then I do have like a couple cognacs, just because I originally started with cognac because it's sweeter, so it's easier to get into. So
Makes sense.
I still have some legacy cognacs from like, I say legacy because those were like the bottles I started with. And that was probably 6 to 8 years ago, and they're still drinking great. You know, I'll come and revisit them. I don't drink cognac as much anymore because I kind of have to be in the mood for it. And I'm much more in the mood for whiskey. So
6 or 8 years, jeez.
yeah. And the argon just keeps it strong. You know,
keeps them coming.
That and also sunlight is really bad for whiskey. So just keeping it away from sunlight and trying to keep it away from extreme temperature variance. You know, room temperature is just fine. And I've moved a lot, you know, in the last 6 to 8 years too. So, you know,
that's what I was surprised about. I'm surprised nobody's done natural fucking things, dude, right? Had to get it fucking safely, especially through any kind of cross country move.
Well, man, they're like the priority whenever I move. If I'm physically driving somewhere, then some of that whiskey at least is gonna be with me, especially the stuff that's open, because that's the stuff that's gonna be the most difficult to try to like not get any spillage or what have you. But in the last couple moves, I've just had professional movers use double lined boxes and use a shit ton of packaging material, right? And then really specify to them like this is like the most important thing to me. So make sure you put it on the truck somewhere where things aren't going to fall on it, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Something else that I found fucking hilarious and like and super interesting about this is that the whole trade, like all these bottles can just skyrocket in value. So like we on the podcast, we have we love to make fun of Gary V and how Gary V wants you to go fucking hustle sports cards or whatever. So instead, today we've got Lester F, who's going to let you know you need to fucking hustle whiskeys.
You know, I'm not a big fan of the secondary market. It's necessary for people who don't have access to certain whiskeys and have the capital to just throw money at it so that they can get it. But like, it's preferable to me to just trade or just help somebody out and just do what's it called? Basically, like you buy it for them and then you ship it. And you charge them just the cost, right? Like I like that kind of way better. But I have sold a couple of bottles on secondary market because it's ridiculous. Some of the bottles out there aren't even that fantastic. It's just because they're rare. And then you have something that the community calls taters, which are like these new entrants into whiskey. You know, they're hobbyists, but they don't spend a lot of time actually considering how it's made or the history of it or any of that stuff. They just want the Pappy Van Winkle bottles and all those other collectible bottles, and they got the cash, right? They're upper middle class, whatever, and they're just shelling out, and they don't care how much it costs. They just want it, right? So those taters are the people that are being taken advantage of, predominantly.
I love that they're called taters.
Yeah, I know. Some of them, but you know, like I can say that there are some whiskeys that I've had for above market rates, and I'm like, okay, well, because of the quality of this or the drinking experience that it brought me, I'd say, you know, as a one-off, it was worth spending 2 or 3 times the retail price to get it because I wasn't able to get it otherwise. Right. But to me, I feel better about it because it was a very informed decision, right? Like I meditated on this, you know, all that kind of stuff.
All right. So can you give us a quick example? I know it's not all about the money.
Yeah.
It's about the love of the booze.
Yeah.
Give us a quick example of what someone in the secondary market could fetch for one of these pappies on these taters.
So the guys that
you
do
wanted
it,
to use
the guys
term,
that do
Rob.
it the best. Yeah. He's adopting the vernacular quickly.
I'm quickly becoming a tater.
Yeah,
some might say.
no, I know. So someone who does it at the highest profit margin, it really depends on how much you value your time, right? So if you go to a liquor barn or something like that in Kentucky or something like that, right, and get yourself on one of these lottery bids to get these sought after whiskeys in the fall, they come out at a certain time in the fall. People know when these dates are, right? Because the distilleries just close them. They'll camp out for a night or multiple nights at a liquor barn, waiting to queue up for this lottery or what have you. However they're doing it, but you basically have to be physically present to play, and they'll wait, and then they'll have the opportunity to buy one or more bottles of these allocated whiskeys. I'll give you an example. Pappy Van Winkle 15 goes for roughly $100 a bottle, and at that price, I would say it's worth it, 100, 120. But you can sell Pappy Van Winkle 15 for like $1,000 a bottle.
Whoa!
So in the secondary market,
That's a steep markup.
right? Yeah,
We're in the wrong business, fellas. We're in the wrong
Yeah.
Oh, but you had to camp out. Or the other way, the better way to do it is you become friends with a local liquor store owner, and you buy a lot of shit that they have a hard time moving, and you're a top customer, so they throw you a Benny by giving you first pick of the allocated bottles that they get, right? Because like from my understanding, from getting kind of close to some of these liquor store owners, in order for them to get like a 3-pack of, let's say, George T. Stagg, which is another phenomenal whiskey at $120 a bottle that can be sold for $500-$600 a bottle. In order to get like a 3-pack of that, they have to buy a shit ton of like, I don't know, like Kettle One and stuff like that, right? Like they have to make it worthwhile for the wholesaler to reward them with this allocated whiskey. So either you're buying a bunch of Kettle One from this guy, or you're buying all of his single barrel store picks, or you're buying a bunch of his other more commercially available whiskeys, and you're developing a relationship with this person, and you're a preferred patron after a while, months, years, what have you. And then that's how you kind of can get it at retail as well, or just above retail. So that's kind of how that goes. I would say, I'm trying to think. The most ridiculous one is probably Pappy Van Winkle 23, the one that's available every year, and that one I think goes for $200 or $250 retail, and I think in the secondary market right now it's like $1,800.
Dude, that's so much money. That's a huge. I couldn't even imagine spending $200 on a bottle of whiskey. I could imagine it. I'm just like, I'm saying, it would have to be occasion, or I'd have to be, I'd have to very much be, into this. But yeah, I mean, dude, 1,800. Ooh.
Well, here's a wonderful thing about bourbon as opposed to Scotch. I feel like, barring the flavor preferences, there are some superior bourbons you can have for between, say, $20 a bottle to like $40 to $50 a bottle. You don't have to spend that much. If you're a single malt Scotch drinker, you're not going to get into a good single malt Scotch until you hit 50 or over, arguably. So right there, the price difference is pretty significant for the quality of the flavor experience. Now you have to enjoy the bourbon flavor profile, which is very different from Scotch. But that said, like I can really enjoy a $30 bourbon or $40 bourbon. To get that same type of enjoyment out of a Scotch, often I have to spend, a 50% more, 100% more, something like that. Most of the Scotches I enjoy drinking are probably closer to the $80 mark, at least $100 mark, at least. So, you can get away with less, but yeah, that's one of the things I really enjoy about bourbon is the barrier to entry is much lower.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. The last time you were telling me about this, the hobo whiskey, and how fucking good hobo whiskey is.
Yeah, so I brought over something. I didn't bring it for this when I thought about making it part of the tasting, but I chose other stuff instead. Jts Brown. So this is a whiskey that typically is only, as I understand it, distributed in like one of 3 states, or up to like 3 or 4 states in the country. One of them happens to be Oregon, and then like Kentucky and like maybe Tennessee or something like that. So it's kind of weird. JTS Brown is made by a family-owned company, Heaven Hill Distillery. They've been around since the 1800s, and it's it's a plastic bottle cap, but it's glass. It's a glass bottle, but plastic bottle cap bourbon, and it's like retails like $15 to $17, something like that, and it is primo for what it is. So it's 4 years old. It's 100 proof, right? 50% alcohol. It's bottled in bond, right, which is like a different classification of whiskey. Yeah, it's amazing, and it's under $20. Another one that's amazing is a Jim Beam product called Old Granddad. So they have a bottled in bond version, which is like 18 or $19, and then they have, and I'm talking about Midwestern retail prices, because if you can find that in New York, let's say, you're going to be paying at least $25-30 for it. And then they have Old Granddad 114, which I think makes a killer Manhattan or a killer old fashioned, because I like high alcohol whiskeys, right? Like cask strength whiskeys. I could drink it straight, but it's 114 proof. So it's amazing. It's so good. And it's a very unassuming bottle. It's very cheap whiskey, but it's amazing.
Dude, I think it's so awesome, dude. Because I mean, it just shows you, like, even if you're younger or you don't have a ton of money, like getting into this, like you can still have like a decent drink.
Yeah, absolutely.
And taste the flavor profile,
Yeah, and a lot of people are really afraid of alcohol content, right? Because like you're used to most of your stuff is going to be 40%. Even like your tequilas, your high-end tequilas, Patrons and all that stuff, they're all bottled at 40%, right? Like vodkas are bottled at 40%. Even like the high-end stuff that's $80-100. Gins are the same, right? So like bourbon, your entry proof is usually a much higher. I say much higher. It's 90 usually, so 45% alcohol. To me, that's an American whiskey. That's a bourbon. Now you have outliers out there like Jack Daniel's, right? Lucky Number 7. That's going to be 40%. Also, Jim Beam White Label is 40%. To me, that's not bourbon, because it has to be 45% to be bourbon. But what I was trying to say is that the more alcohol you have in the whiskey, the more flavor you have access to.
Really?
Like basically the alcohol holds on to the flavors. It holds on to the wood polymers, the wood sugars, the esters, all those congeners that have been in the whiskey, just like oxidizing and mingling with the wood. So the more alcohol you have, the more flavor you've got.
Yeah, it makes sense from a chemistry perspective. Alcohol is highly reactive, so be reacting with all that stuff, holding on to all of it, which is like, I don't know why we think like that's counterintuitive. Like, oh, there's more alcohol in it, it's going to taste more like, isopropyl alcohol or something.
Well, like it's tough. I feel like it's tough to get into it, because like when I first started drinking, right? Like to me, whiskey or any spirit for that matter, it was a means to an end, right? Just to get really fucked up really quick, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
whenever I forced down whiskey, right? If I wasn't using a chaser of some sort or Silco with lime or something ugly and nasty like that, I was tasting basically 2x4 soaked in isopropyl alcohol. I used to say that. I was like, this tastes like 2x4 soaked in isopropyl alcohol. Like, it's disgusting, right? So like you have to like coax yourself and prime yourself in the right way so that you can receive those flavors and be ready to receive them, right? Like,
right.
Anytime I pour something for someone, they're automatically like wincing because they're assuming that I want them to just knock it back like a cowboy or something like that. And it's like, no, like I feel like half the time, if I were to knock it back, I might throw up. I don't know,
Right.
And I drink a lot of whiskey, but I just don't knock things back because it's not really that enjoyable.
No.
Yeah.
Can't do that with Jack Daniels anymore. That comes straight back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First sipping for sure.
For sure.
I mean, I don't know how you think we should go forward. I mean, one thing that I figured maybe we could touch on before we get like right into it is like maybe a little back history, like where bourbon gets its name or anything like that, like any tall tales. I mean, it's America, it's folklore, right?
Yeah. So I've been to, because I lived pretty close to Kentucky. I lived just north of Nashville for a couple of years, and I certainly took advantage of the whiskey trail nearby there. And actually, one of the craft distilleries we're gonna try today, MB Roland, is a lesser known distillery in Kentucky that's doing some really interesting stuff. But yeah, there's a bunch of folklore, and some of it's like wishy-washy. No one's really sure the exact origin of bourbon. But I was telling Ron last time I was here, the distinctive thing about bourbon, and where a lot of people speculate bourbon gets its name, is back when people were trying to shuttle stuff back and forth from the port of New Orleans up further north, taking the Mississippi, and then further on branching out to the Ohio River. And you'd end up the end of that, you'd end up in Bourbon County. And but back then, like this was after Revolutionary War and all that stuff. The frontiermen were giving away plots of land to anyone who, because there was lots of cornfields out there, or you could create cornfields. It was the easiest thing to grow out there. And they were, because of like things like the bourbon, the whiskey rebellion and stuff like that, the excise taxes and all that stuff, it was not very cost effective to distribute. It was also difficult to distribute whiskey, so they often had to make it very localized to where they were. So the frontiersmen would be like, "Hey, I'll give you land, you give me whiskey," basically. So there was a lot of whiskey being made in that, Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Kentucky area, and that was very close to the, I think, the Ohio River. And these goods would come from New Orleans in barrels. And oftentimes there were a lot of different things in them, but sometimes there would be foodstuffs in them, right? Preserved fish and that sort of stuff. And so to make use of these barrels when they get to the other side, in Bourbon County or what have you, they would clean them out and char them to kind of remove the smells and taste that you could get from those whiskeys. So they caramelize those wood sugars, and they take the whiskey from Bourbon County and pour it in the barrels. And then oftentimes to save space on the boats, the cargo ships, they would just like lash all these barrels together and throw them in the water, and then tug them behind the boat. So there'd be a lot of sloshing, there'd be temperature variance, all that stuff. Some of the whiskey would end up on the boat, some of it would be in the water, all that stuff bobbing around for weeks or months or whatever. And it'd get down to New Orleans, and they would get whiskey from multiple places, but they would stamp typically on the barrels where it would come from. And because the furthest whiskey away was the stuff in Bourbon County, it had the most time to mature, right, in those barrels. So it had a little bit more flavor than your typical clear whiskey or your moonshine, whatever you want to call it. So people would say, "Give me that whiskey from Bourbon." If the bars that had the Bourbon County barrels were the ones that were most popular for those who had discerning taste, because they knew that stuff was going to be tastier. So that's kind of like how that came about in the late 1700s, early 1800s.
I gotta say, I think that's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like the whole tugging it behind the ship. I'm just like, fuck
yeah,
it'll be okay.
Yeah.
So there's a company out there now called Jefferson's. I forgot who they're affiliated with, but they do a label called Jefferson's Ocean, and they do an ocean voyage. So they circumnavigate the globe on cargo vessels, and they put them up top. And I don't know however many months it takes to do that, but they age them for a while in their warehouse, and then they finish them off basically on this voyage. And that causes a lot of ruckus inside of the casks, right? Because there's a lot of jostling of the whiskey, there's a lot of evaporation. They experience, like, because they're crossing the equator a bunch, right? So there's hot and cold all the time, lots of humidity, all that stuff. So you end up getting like a very flavorful and slightly like there's some salinity in this bourbon. And I've had a couple batches of it. It's actually pretty fantastic stuff.
Damn.
Yeah.
How hard is that to get? That sounds like it's got to be tough to.
I've seen it in Manhattan. You can get it. It's going to be between $80 and $100.
Okay.
Not too bad. It's pretty. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty good considering the amount of effort it takes to make that.
Yeah. I mean, $80 or $100, yeah, to have some shit that they had to sail around the world.
Yeah, dude.
It's pretty fair.
For my enjoyment, to get me drunk and fucked up.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Perfect. So
you guys want to get started?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm pumped, dude.
All right, so whip out your number one here.
Number one.
Let's do it.
All right. So this first one, is kind of one of those hype whiskeys, right? That like it's good for the cost, for the retail price of it, but the taters want this so bad.
The taters.
They will pay obscene amounts of money for this whiskey. And I'm fortunate enough I got this stuff at the original retail price a few years ago. I mean, obviously retail prices always go up, but it significantly went up. Like it went from like $30, $35 to like $35. It went up to like $50. But now this whiskey in the secondary market goes for probably close to $200 a bottle.
Damn.
Yeah. So this is Weller 12. And Weller 12 is a wheated bourbon. So this is made by parent company Sazerac. They're a private company, and they own Buffalo Trace.
Shout out to Ant.
Oh,
He's in the
nice.
chat. He loves
Buffalo
Sazerac.
Trace.
Huge fan.
Yeah. So Buffalo Trace makes some of the
They're
best
good.
whiskey out there.
Mhm.
Honestly, I love a lot of different brands, but they do hit the mark on so many of their labels. They have over 20 labels, and like I'd say like 70% more probably of the hype whiskeys and like the sought after allocated stuff comes from Buffalo Trace. And they make Pappy Van Winkle for Julian Van Winkle, the Van Winkle family. They make it under contract for him because Van Winkles ran out of the stocks from the like historic Stitzel Weller distillery that used to make amazing wheated bourbons. So wheated bourbons are a little less known. The most popular ones, I'm going to say, well, the first most popular one is Maker's Mark. That's a wheated bourbon. And then the second most popular, I would say, in my opinion, is Larceny, which is actually a little cheaper than Maker's Mark. That's made by Heaven Hill Distilleries. So with wheat, so with bourbon, you need at least 51% corn in the mash bill, right? That's the ingredient list, right? The 51% corn, and then usually you have a little bit of malted barley in there to help with fermentation because malted barley's got an enzyme in it that helps with releasing the sugars needed for fermentation. So they'll mash that in with the corn, and then there's usually a flavoring grain. So the flavoring grain is either wheat, some sort of wheat. Most bourbon companies use red winter wheat. I don't know the different variations between them, but there are heirloom wheats and all that, just like there are heirloom corns and stuff. But most people use yellow dent number 2 corn. They use red winter wheat, and they use a little bit of malted barley, using 5 to 10% of the mash bill, sometimes 15%. So in this case, they're using wheat. Wheat's going to be a little softer. It's gonna have more vanilla notes, a little bit more caramel. It's going to be a little sweeter. It's going to be great for aging long term. The most prominent flavoring grain is rye, right? And that's going to have a lot more spice character, and we're going to get into that later. But I really thought it'd be nice to get in here with a wheated bourbon. This is also bottled at 90 proof, so 45% alcohol. So it's just really good. It's 12 years old, so it's got a lot of age to it. This is the same mash bill, arguably aged roughly the same way as Van Winkle 10 or Van Winkle 12 would be. So yeah, a lot of people like this as a hype whiskey because they think it's like a cousin or a brother to the Van Winkle bourbons. Okay. So if you guys aren't accustomed to drinking whiskey in this way where you're trying to savor it and stuff, what I like to tell people to try to do is, kind of try to get your nose in. It's a little easier if you're using a nosing glass of some sort, if you're using a coffee mug or just a rocks glass, and it's a little tougher to do that. So you first smell it, right? And you should get some fruity notes, some vanilla, a little caramel, and then when you taste it, this is going to be especially important for the ones that are higher proof later. You're going to want to put just a tad in your mouth, just a little bit, and you're going to want it to be in the front of your mouth, right? Like you pucker your lips, and it's just right there in the front of your mouth with your teeth, and then you slowly let it run to your cheeks, and you allow that to dilute with your saliva. You're going to start to salivate. Then you swallow and exhale. So that's your first sip. It's like a primer. It's a little bit. You'll get some burn, but when the exhale is going to help with that. And then after that exhale, you'll be like, whoa, because all of a sudden there's going to be this vacuum of flavor that like sucks you in, and you're going to be like, whoa, I've never tasted this stuff before. So that should be your first sip, especially like if you want to be fussy and you're studying like a new whiskey, right? Then your second sip, you can be a little bit more generous with it, but this time you start the same way, front of your mouth, right? And then you bring it back and you bring it to your tongue and you put it above the tongue, below the tongue. You not necessarily swish, but you move it to the left, you move it to the right. So you're letting it marry into all of your taste buds. And then after you've really diluted it and the burn is kind of dissipated, so I'm talking like 15, 20 seconds here, then you swallow again and exhale. So that's what you should try to do, and let me know what you get out of that.
Interesting.
Without further ado.
Taste of vanilla for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It's a lot. It's not as harsh as you think it's gonna be. But yeah, definitely taste the vanilla and caramel in it for sure.
Compared to that, because we opened prior to the show, we opened with a little bit of rye, and compared to rye, this is just like it's like on another wavelength as far as bite goes. You know, like it's very smooth, super smooth compared to the rye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna mention that the one that we started with. This one is a lot smoother, and I can like that vanilla taste at the end. I feel kind of gives it that little bit of smoothness on the back end as well. It was awesome.
Yeah, and a couple of things you should try to assess is like after maybe your second or third drink. Now you're wanting to assess maybe the finish, right? So now, how long does it persist? What is it doing? Is your mouth tingling? Is your tongue tingling? The roof of your mouth? Are you feeling like this velvety feeling, like certain whiskeys? Like last time we did a tasting, you kind of feel like that there's hair in your mouth that's standing up, and that's creating like this chewing thing. Like it's almost like a viscosity. Like you get this thickness, and that's kind of how it comes across, this rich, chewy kind of flavor that you can get from some really well-made whiskeys. This one's a little bit milder, but it's certainly got some nice characteristics of silkiness and vanilla and caramel, like you were talking about. Maybe even on the front end, I call it the front palate. You might get some like red fruit, just a little hint of some red fruit notes. A little juiciness, I guess you could say.
I just took my larger sip, and like towards the back of the palate, I feel like it has like a darker taste to it. I don't want to say chocolate because that's way off. I'm having trouble placing it though, but it's like a richer taste on the back of the palate. But it's actually
I definitely got
really
that velvety like viscosity from the second tasting, where you just kind of like let it go all over your tongue and hit all the different taste buds you have in your mouth. It's definitely a lot smoother than the one we started off with. It's good.
Yeah, I like this one.
My white trash taste buds aren't refined enough to taste the red fruit at the beginning, but
dude, you'll get some citrus out of some of these for sure, dude. Or not just citrus, but fruit in general. Sorry.
So some of this also with training your palate, one is like tasting different things and being mindful of when you drink. Like when I do a 1.5 ounce pour or something like that, sometimes it takes me 45 minutes to an hour to drink it, right? Because part of half the fun is just nosing it. And then that curiosity carries over where I'll do whiskey tastings and I'll put food that complements like praline pecans and like candied cranberries. milk chocolate, dark chocolate, right? Like those kinds of things. Even something maybe milder if you need something more substantial in your gut from eating too much, from drinking too much. Hummus, right? With like a nice lightly salted cracker. If you're really hardcore and you got a bunch of me's in the room, maybe you have coffee beans that you shake up and then smell those to kind of like cleanse your olfactory senses.
I've got the next best thing. Some chocolate.
Yeah.
Caffeine.
I'm not going to eat that right now.
Does,
Yeah, but that would work
Cleanse the
perfectly.
palate.
Out of
Yes.
out of curiosity, would ginger work? Like what they do with sushi to cleanse the palate?
I wouldn't have ginger just because there's a lot of spice there. So
Okay.
you want things that are going to complement, that are going to remind you of the flavors that you're having in the whiskey. Because
Okay.
there's sometimes some interesting synergies that happen where you're like, whoa, like all of a sudden this chocolate is like amped up, right? Or something like that. And you kind of cue in on these things. Or you get curious about a flavor that you couldn't quite put your finger on, right? Because we're like, this is imperfect, right? We're trying to take these senses and then like put language to them. So
Right.
you have to like come up with these crazy weird descriptions if you really want to be fussy about what it is, the sensation that you're experiencing, right? Which is why like people would laugh at someone who like drinks red wine and say it's like a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. Like, what are you trying to capture by saying something ridiculous like that, right? Like, but you can learn a lot about tasting notes from wine folks, which is what I did.
See, postmodernists, eat your heart out. Fucking instead of worried about the intersectionality of women's feminist dance theory and where it overlaps with male, aggression and holding you down, you have unlimited freedom to define taste in whiskeys and wine.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of consumables, right? It's like my highest form of hedonism. I feel like is it's enjoying fine consumables and sharing them. How far down are you guys? So before we got on, I recommended that you guys like limit yourselves to like half of the bottle to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys do that? Did you guys pour the whole thing in there?
No, I did half.
Yeah.
Half.
Cool. They're scared. You guys gun shy, dude. Should have just dumped that shit in there and drank it, dude. No, I'm kidding. Look, he's offended.
Just don't mix it with Diet Coke or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like the big no. Don't mix this stuff with any chasers. The ultimate affront.
Just stuff it in the beers.
Yeah.
Just taking shots to just get it down instead of actually enjoying it.
So have any of you guys had a weeded bourbon before, as far as you know, whether it's
not that I know
or something like that? Okay.
No.
I've had Maker's Mark before.
Even before drinking with you, I've had Maker's Mark for sure. Yeah.
I think Maker's Mark is super solid. So there's another Weller called Weller Antique. It's aged for a little less time, but it's bottled at 107 proof. And I've blind tasted that with Maker's Mark cask strength. So for anyone that may be listening that is salivating over having a Weller product and they can't find it anywhere because it's like really hard to find and very expensive if you do find it. You can find it in New York all over the place, but you're gonna be paying $200 plus for it. And it retails for like 50 now. So
New York prices, baby.
Just about everyone in the country is like that.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Really?
The Weller 12 that I bought was like right before I got out of the army. They like sent a case to like the PX or the Class 6. And
damn,
I had been talking to like the manager of the Class 6 for a while because I knew they were getting allocated stuff every once in a while. And
so it's always smooth.
Yeah, and it's smooth. And like I was able to get one, and then he saw that I got one. He's like, "Hey, do you want another one?" Because like the guy who like he told this guy to like hook me up. So the guy's like, "Okay, I'll give him one," because he like only 6 came in or whatever. And the manager's like, "Do you want another one?" I was like, "Absolutely, man, I'll take it." So I got 2 for like $35 or something like that each.
Nice.
A good deal.
Yeah, but back to what I was saying, Maker's Mark cask strength is a pretty fantastic product. That goes for about $55 a bottle, but it also is like 110 proof, usually 111 proof. So that is a really good substitute for Weller Antique.
So what's the popularity of something like just a regular Jack Daniels or Jim Beam? Is that like, somebody who's a beer drinker, but like they like Miller Lite or Bud Light? Is it like the same thing, kind of?
I think so. That's typically the demographic, but I would say also that there are like I've ran into like 'cause my wife's a pretty big beer geek and I was a beer geek before I got into spirits. And there are a fair amount of beer geeks that just like dabble in whiskey, but like they don't want to commit to it because it's like, oh, I don't want to get this other vice that I have to learn all this shit about. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I've been like that before too, because I like going down rabbit holes, right? Like this is the way I am about everything I'm interested in. So I can't like just like half-ass it. I have to like go in there and like learn everything I can about it and keep researching and stuff. Just always thirsty for that. So yeah, so there are some people who are snobby about other consumables that just don't know much about whiskey and they just default to, the cheaper stuff just because it's easier.
Right. More available, and they just know it's a brand that they know or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, not to take anything away from those guys, much like if you go tour Miller Coors brewery, or Anheuser-Busch brewery, it's very impressive what these guys do as far as from a reliability, quality control, consistency
Right.
standpoint, making massive batches, making it all taste the same, and making it so that it's pasteurized to the point that it's consistent and also still okay if you open it 8 months, 12 months later, as a low gravity beer, because that's like a craft beer, like it's like stale after 4 to 6 months, most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very impressive what the big guys do, and all these big guys make some pretty premium stuff though, right? So like Jim Beam, some of my favorite whiskeys come from Jim Beam, but just not Jim Beam White Label. I think the lowest label I would drink from Jim Beam, like Jim Beam proper, right? Because they make Old Granddad, they make Booker's, they make Knob Creek, they make other stuff that I think is fantastic. The cheapest Jim Beam, that I'll drink is Jim Beam Black. They're extra aged. Okay, so that's 45%. That makes an amazing old fashioned. It's like 15 or $20 a bottle. I think it is a wonderful, wonderful bourbon for the price.
Yeah, that seems like a good
Wouldn't
price
go
point
any
for
cheaper
sure.
than that. What's that?
That sounds like a good price point, like where you'd want to be, Like,
Yeah, maybe $22 a bottle, but it is a fantastic, like, if you don't want to fuss, and you just want to hang out and know that something's just going to taste good, and you can like every once in a while you're bullshitting, you're like, I'm reminded by how good this is tasting, right? Because like sometimes you just don't want to think about it. You just want to drink and whatever. Something like a Jim Beam Black is fantastic. Or if you want to have friends over and you want to make a cocktail that's a little bit better than something then Jim Beam Black would be great for old fashions. Or even if fucking someone wants to mix it with Coke or whatever.
Right.
That's because when I was into cognac, I was traveling a lot, and one of the guys that I worked with, the dude he loved smoking cigars while we were traveling, so I'd always smoke cigars with him while we were on the road. And like I was in my cognac stage, and cognacs pair great with cigars typically, right? It's a really good cigar smoking drink. But if you get fussy about cognac like I do, then you'll find these situations where like you're like, this is not hitting right. This is not the ideal flavor profile. This cigar is clashing with this cognac type of thing. And he would always have his Crown and Coke. That's what he drank all the time. He would buy a big ass like 1.75 Crown, and then he buys his Coke, right? Like his Diet Coke or whatever he had. And I will tell you, I've never had a cigar, and he would never drink expensive shit, but he would buy $35, $40, $50 cigars like Opus X's and stuff like that when we were in Vegas. And I've never had a cigar that didn't go well with a Crown and Coke. Never. It's always good. It's always a great pairing. I can't take that away from Crown and Coke. I can't.
Crown and Coke
is a staple.
Smoked one with a Crown and Coke. What's that?
I've never smoked one with a Crown and Coke.
Yeah,
I love Crown
I don't
and
think I
Coke.
have either.
I do too. Yeah, that's a staple of mine.
Yeah, I used to always shit on him, and then I tried it, and then I would just try his drink every once in a while. I'm like, dude, that again, another knockout. It's always good.
What do you think of flavored whiskeys? Are they a travesty, like Crown Apple?
Those kind, yes, but they're
Tennessee honey.
Yeah, exactly.
They're very
because I'm not gonna lie, bro. That Tennessee honey is good.
So good with Coke.
I mean, yeah, with the Coke, like when I'm trying to get drunk and shit, and just it's fucking good.
Yeah, so I think for someone in my position, what you're looking at is like the integrity of the craft. So it's like it's not that you can't flavor something; it's that the way they're flavoring it is probably not in the like. It's not like putting quality in the uppermost portion of their mind, right? Like they're looking at profit margin, they're looking at market cap, like how much are they going to be able to distribute all that stuff, right? So they're doing it at the lowest cost possible. I assume they're using some kind of artificial flavoring, right?
Yeah.
That I can't get behind. But if you're actually taking a barrel, like some places, like one of the whiskeys you're going to have later, Belle Mead, they make something called Belle Mead Honey. That comes out once a year, twice a year. And Belle Mead Honey is like $80 or $100 a bottle, but people sell it right away. They flip it for $7.50. All right. So Belle Mead Honey, I guess, tastes amazing. And they actually put fucking honey in the barrels and then spin the barrels to get the whole thing on the inside coated. And then they finish the whiskey. I mean, the whiskey's been aging for years, 8 years, whatever. And then they finish it in there for a couple months with the honey. Right. So
I need to get my hands on that. That's not
at that point, I'm okay with that flavored whiskey, you know.
But yeah, that's fair.
But it's like gonna be 2-3 times the price retail, right? From what Tennessee honey is.
Sure.
And you're not gonna be able to get it, right? So you're gonna have to pay secondary for it, which is gonna be like 7-8 times the price.
That's
right. So
I gotta start schmoozing.
Yeah.
I gotta start schmoozing, dude. I gotta head down to the liquor store.
Well, the only place you can get that, as I understand, is right at the distillery. You have to like line up to get it.
Damn.
Yeah,
Wow.
so this is a distillery in Nashville, Tennessee that we'll talk later. Let me see. The next whiskey we're gonna have,
big number 2,
is number 2. This is a low rye. Are you guys ready? Just assuming.
Oh yeah.
Hurry it up. Get that shit.
We ready.
Up.
All right. The next one is a low rye whiskey. So this one, Buffalo Trace doesn't disclose
thank you,
like exactly what their percentage is of their grain in their mash bills, but people assume that this is around the 10% range. And this is Eagle Rare is the name of it. It's a 10-year-old bourbon, and up to maybe 2015, 2016, something like that, it was labeled like a single barrel product. But then they automated the production line. So now, like, even though technically it's still kind of single barrel as far as like their intention, because they run these lines through the barrels and then they don't purge the lines in between the barrels, they just go from one barrel and then they bottle another barrel and then they bottle another barrel. They can't say it's single barrel anymore, but it's pretty much a single barrel product. It's 10 years old. It's got 10% rye in it, and then the rest of it is predominantly, most people say like 80 or more percent corn, and then the rest malted barley. And the interesting thing about Eagle Rare is that this mash bill is very popular. They do a lot of great things with it. They age Eagle Rare like at the bottom of the rick houses. So the bottom is cooler, much cooler than the top. So it lends itself much better to aging product longer term. And they don't rotate their whiskeys in the rick house. Like there's some distillers out there that do, like Maker's Mark. So Maker's Mark will take their whiskeys. They have like their rick houses are like 6 ricks high. They'll take the bottom 3 and rotate them with the top 3 after 3 years to try to get a consistency in product, which I was like, that's a lot of work to do that.
Yeah.
So, because these barrel warehouses have like thousands of barrels in them, tens of thousands, of barrels in some cases. So, but that's what makers do to try to maintain a more consistent product. In the case of Buffalo Trace, I don't think they really do that. And Eagle Rare typically comes from their bottom, like number 1 or number 2 rick.
The coffee cup kills me.
Gotta love the coffee cup, bro.
So this one's also 45%. And then because it's got so much corn in it, you're gonna get more of a sweeter profile. And it's gonna be pretty easy to drink, pretty easy going. This is something you can throw an ice cube in, drink during the summer. You know, it's not like super rich in like baking spices. It's not overly complex, any of that stuff. This is just like a really solid, you know, like bourbon.
I was gonna say it's very drinkable.
Yeah.
Like this is definitely something you can go out and like if you're not, you know, trying to really get into you know, crazy tasting, you know, maybe have this with dinner and it would be like, you know what I mean? Depending on the dinner.
Yeah, this is really good. It's
I think that's really good.
It's like almost smoother than that Weller 12, but in a different way. This one doesn't have as it doesn't seem to have as much viscosity when you
thinner,
kind of a little bit thinner in your mouth.
Yeah.
You should get a little bit of presence of that rye spice. I'm getting it in like say the mid palate and back.
Yeah, I'm getting in the back of my tongue.
A little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of heat kind of. A little bit of baking spice, but not as much like some of these other ones that are going to punch you in the mouth as far as flavor goes. But this is just a really good all-around whiskey. And like I said, it's a low rye, so it's very approachable because some people don't like the sting of rye.
Yeah, it's a lot sweeter. Very good.
Yeah, I'm getting that in the back of my palate as well. That rye taste.
Yeah, that's the one thing I noticed when I first tasted it was that in the background palate, but I was like, I don't know what that is. So I'm glad you mentioned it because I was like,
yeah, Drew's a natural dude over here. Drew's got the viscosity down.
Like he's taking notes and stuff too.
He's a natural.
I am.
Is that what's going on? Cool.
Yeah, taking notes like a scientist.
I should have taken notes.
I'm taking notes. Like at the end, could be like, which one do I like the best and all that stuff
Maybe
as well.
I did, and I just got too drunk and I forgot. Check my notes.
Yeah, Zach's asking me to do a tasting for him. Zach McDaniel.
I don't think I know.
You don't know?
I don't think so.
Okay, he's a veteran mentor over at Columbia.
Yeah, I don't think I know. Oh, is he a real tall guy? Blonde hair? Yeah, I know. Yep, I know. No of them. Anyway, that was a sidebar. Yeah, dude, this is very tasty.
This one, because it's so much thinner and because the alcohol content is, like I said, like that baseline 90 proof that I feel like every bourbon should be. I feel like this one's a lot easier to just like kick back if you want to as well, right? Like if you want to take in more and just swallow it, it's especially after priming yourself with that high proof rye we had, and then the Weller product, it should be easier to go down.
Yeah, who knew there was so much distinction between bourbon flavors?
Yeah, I had no idea, man.
Yeah, me neither.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's like you know, when you're, you know, nobody teaches you any of the stuff when you gotta go find it all out on your own if you want to. But like when you're, you know, you start your drinking journey or whatever it is, it's like you got your American whiskeys that taste like shit, and then you got like Scotch, it's like drinking smoke. And then you got to find a happy medium somewhere between, like wherever it lies, and that's what you usually stick with.
I think your palate refines too, you know. Like when I was younger, man, like it was like he was saying, man, like I didn't give a fuck what it was, dude. Just put it in my glass.
I drink for performance.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is as long as it's octane, high octane, I'm good to go, dude. But I don't know. I didn't start getting into, and I never really actually really got into them. But like I preferred, like when I would be at a ball or when I was at a function, I preferred scotches. You know, I drink Chivas or I drink like, you know, stuff like that. And I don't know, I would have never drank that when I was 22. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think over time you kind of, you know, you develop a taste for things. And it all started for me because I was out to eat with people. I was having steak, and they're like, "Bro, you gotta have some scotch." Like, what are you doing? Like, are you even American? Are you a man? Are you American? I was like, "Oh, okay. I'll have some scotch with my steak." And I liked it. It was good.
The interesting thing about blended scotch is that oftentimes it's So blended Scotch, if you don't know, it's gonna have some form of single malt scotches in them, right? It'll have some percentage of it, usually a small percentage of the blend. And then it'll predominantly be grain whiskeys is what they call them, right? And they're usually distilled instead of at a pot still. What's pot stills distill at a lower proof. You get more flavor out of them because it's a heavier spirit that comes out of a pot still. Grain whiskeys are made in like the sense that vodkas would be made out of a column still, reflux still. So these things, continuous stills, they make a higher proof product, but they strip a lot of flavor out of the scotch, but out of the distillate. But it's very efficient. You get a higher yield. It cooks faster. All that stuff. So they'll throw that stuff in barrel too. And then your Johnny Walkers and Chivas Regas of the world, famous Bruce, whatever. They'll take those after a certain amount of time, 10, 15, 20 years, usually longer age. And then they'll blend that with the single malt scotches and you'll get your blended scotches. But oftentimes those grain whiskeys are made in a similar mash bill as an American bourbon would be, right? Like there'll be a lot more corn in them, maybe some rye, right? Because like malted barley is arguably one of the most expensive grains you can use for distilling. So corn and rye are a little bit cheaper. Certainly rye is cheaper in the United States, I think, than other parts of the world. But corn and rye are predominantly used for those grain whiskeys.
Grain whiskey.
See,
I mean, we had a conversation about like the international differences with all different types of whiskeys that are out there. And you were talking a lot last time about like the peat, like peat scotches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That stuff's pretty interesting to me, that like people were able to basically figure out. I guess my interest in booze comes from the fact that people were able to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, it's like a sociological, anthropological kind of thing, right? It's that interest, right? Like how did they decide to cut out, dinosaur vegetation that's like, right? Like this stuff is like mud, right? This stuff is mud, and they're gonna like cook it and then stop the germination of your barley, so that they can get the right kind of sugar out of it, and then that smoke flavor is gonna be imparted in the whiskey, right? Like that's
early scientists, dude.
Yeah,
it's fucking.
And it's funny that everyone equates Scotch with smokiness because like that's only one region of Scotland. That's Islay, right?
That's what we were talking
about.
But
There's so much Scotch that's non-peated or lightly peated. Like your island whiskeys, like from the Orkney Islands, Highland Park, they do like a 30% peated, 70% unpeated. Springbank in the Campbellton area region near Islay, they also do a little bit of peat. But then your Highland whiskeys, which are like predominantly what you get out of Scotland, not peated whatsoever, right? So those are like your Macallans, Glenfarclas, Clynelish, if you know that brand, right? Like your Balvenie and all that stuff.
Yeah,
it's crazy. I know Japanese whiskey is pretty big too.
Yep.
Yeah, those guys basically like out-Scotch the Scotch, right? Like they took the inspiration from Scotland and said, what do they do well and how do we capture that essence? And then fuss about it the way we do about everything else, right?
Yeah.
And they like made their whiskey in some ways better than Scotch whiskey, right? Like
it's crazy.
They source the best casks. That's why oftentimes Japanese whiskey is a little bit more expensive. Some of it is hype as well, but like they source the best casks. They spare no expense. And because their volume is much lower, they can afford to do that. Whereas like in Scotland, they can't discriminate. They just have to take what they got and then do what they can with it. So
right.
Now does whiskey or bourbon have to be aged in oak barrels?
Yes. So yeah, rules of bourbon. It's got to be at least 51% corn. I was kind of getting into this earlier. It's got to be aged in a charred white oak barrel. It's got to be a brand new oak barrel. It can't have been previously been used for anything. It's got coming off this, like these are technicalities, but coming off the still, it can't get any higher than 160 proof. And the implication to that is the higher the proof, the more you're stripping as far as flavor goes. Like vodkas are usually distilled up to like 190 proof. just to put things in perspective. Most distillers don't distill up to 160 proof. They usually stop somewhere 100, 130, 140. Some stop even earlier. It can't go into the barrel any higher than 125 proof. So if you have it higher than that, you have to cut it with water, then put it in the barrel. And then for it to be a straight bourbon, which most bourbons want to be straight bourbons, or most companies want their bourbons to be straight bourbons, it has to be aged at least 2 years. But if it's not aged for at least 4 years, then you have to put the age statement on the bottle. So if you see straight bourbon and it has no age, then you can assume at that point it's at least 4 years old.
That was another thing that I thought was crazy, was all these regulations.
Yeah.
Like just like that. Like I never do that. Like when I'm walking past in a liquor store, I'm walking past straight bourbon. I didn't know that not having the age on there means something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No fucking clue.
Now, if it doesn't say straight bourbon, that tells you something else as well. That tells you that it's not adhering to that 2-year requirement, or at least they're not trying to be fussy about that because like they want to have like more flex in their production capacity so that they don't have to change the label if they change something in the bottle, so to speak, right? So straight bourbon's kind of like a testament to like, like aging the product for a certain period of time and committing to that, because usually the longer you age something within reason, the better it's going to taste. Most people say the sweet spot for, bourbons that have rye in them is somewhere between 6 and 8 years. But you have plenty of fantastic 4-year-old bourbons as well. So, but those are the typical rules for bourbon. And then the biggest customer for these barrels is Scotland and the rest of the world. India, Taiwan, Japan. They take these barrels, these 53-gallon barrels typically is a full format barrel. They'll break them down and their coopers will reassemble them into what's called hogsheads. So Scotland really set the standard for like barrel sizing, and American barrels are called like quarter casks. They're considered smaller because like hogsheads, there's a range for how big a hogshead is, but it's typically anywhere between 63 and like 70 gallons, as opposed to 53 gallons. So inherently, they have to tear these barrels apart, and I think they usually do that before they even ship them. And then they take all those staves and they rebuild into a. So the other standard for bourbon is the bottled and bond standard, which has kind of changed a little bit from when it started back in like I think it was 1887 or 1897, something like that. It was a testament to quality because back then people would add adjuncts and nasty stuff to whiskey. Just to add as filler, right? Like to make it look like it was aged, they'd add like tobacco, like dip spit to it, or they'd add like other types of alcohol besides ethanol. These kinds of things, right? Like they were adulterating these spirits, and it was making people sick, or people weren't liking the quality of it. So back then, they created this law that said that if you adhere to certain rules, you could label your whiskey as bottled and bond, which was a testament to quality because at that point the government was involved. So these whiskeys needed to be aged in bonded warehouses where like the tax collectors, because there were tax collectors physically at these distilleries back when everything was analog, like the tax collector had the key to this warehouse and only he could open this warehouse up. So they knew no one was going in there. It has to be distilled by one distiller in one season. And it has to be aged for at least 4 years. It has to be at least 100 proof when it's bottled. So people still do that to pay homage to that tradition of bottled and bond. But there's a lot of bottles that would adhere to that, or brands that adhere to that standard, but don't actually go to that length, especially with the bonded warehouses and stuff, which is kind of like unnecessary nowadays. So, you guys ready for the next one?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Numero tres.
All right. So number 3 is Belle Mead bourbon, and this is a single barrel 12-year.
This is that Belle Mead, the guys who make Belle Mead honey, huh?
Yes.
Looking forward. Can't wait to taste the regular stuff.
So man, these guys are awesome. So the distillery is called Nelson's Greenbrier. They have like an incredible story of how they got started. They're out of Nashville. It was like these two brothers that found out that they had some lineage with like a great grandfather who was like who was a distiller way back in the day. Turns out the guy was like bigger than Jack Daniels was back in the 1800s. Like their great grandfather, great great grandfather, whoever it was, came over on a boat, and like his dad died from like falling overboard on a ship.
Yikes.
Back then, right, like the ship was sinking, and back then, like what he did was he all of his material assets he liquidated, and he exchanged it for gold bars. And since he had nowhere to put it, because they were poor, right? Like he got a coat tailored to line his coat with gold bars. And when he jumped off the ship, he drowned. Like, so they had nothing to their name. And this kid, like, he ended up working at a butcher shop, a grocery store, all this stuff. So come to find out, he becomes a crazy distiller. And then they shut everything down after he dies or something like that. And then these brothers find out about it in the early 2000s, and they decide to make this happen and figure out how they're going to start a distillery again in the same vein as their great great grandfather. And back then they had their grandfather had a relationship with a Indiana producer. I think they were called Seagrams back then, back in the 1800s, and they would contract distill or his bourbon for him. And back then it was Belle Mead bourbon, so they renamed their bourbon Belle Mead bourbon and restarted that relationship with what is now called Midwestern Grain Products, MGP, who contract distills this product for them and barrels some of it for them, and then it brings it down like as it gets more mature, because they have very limited warehousing space. But they also make a Tennessee whiskey on premises, and their Tennessee whiskey is really good, and it's actually a wheated mash bill, because Tennessee whiskey basically adheres to the same rules as bourbon does, but Tennessee wants to be different, so they run their stuff off the still through charcoal mellow it. So they make that, but they have this Belle Mead bourbon that gets made for them by MGP. MGP makes a lot of stuff, and back in the early 2000s, when bourbon really started getting popular, all these people started these brands and were buying stuff from MGP and sourcing it, right? So these are independent bottlers. They were sourcing this stuff. They call them non-distiller producers. And they were selling all this juice, this hype juice, right? Because MGP was making great stuff and they couldn't get rid of it for decades. Like bourbon was like out of fashion for a long time. So they had all this great product that no one gave a shit about. And then all of a sudden people started buying it, hipsters and stuff, and created the market that we have today. So this MGP stuff is really sought after, the really old bottles, like from 10, 15 years ago. And I've had some of them and they're ridiculous. Yeah, so MGP is still out there doing their thing. They're still distilling for all kinds of brands that you wouldn't know. Even companies like George Dickel. George Dickel's rye is made by Midwestern Grain Products.
I didn't know
which
that.
is weird because Dickel's is owned by Diageo, which is a big alcohol conglomerate who owns Johnny Walker and a bunch of other brands. Yeah, so it's an interesting relationship. So this is a sourced bourbon. They're very transparent about that, right? And they're actually proud of that linkage because they had it. Their grandfather had it with the previous owner of that distillery way back when, right? That distillery's changed hands multiple times. It's a massive industrial production facility for whiskey and other distillates too. Yeah, so this is a high rye bourbon. Which usually high rise constitutes something in like the teens to 20-something percent range of rye. So this is 12 years old. A lot of their single barrel products, this is really hard to get to. Usually you can't get this outside of the distillery or there's like the surrounding liquor stores around Nashville area. So I got this stuff right before I moved from there to Washington State. And most of their stuff is going to be in the high 50s, low 60s percent alcohol. This one is pretty distinctive because it's 51% alcohol. and it's 12 years old. So you should be, I haven't tried it yet, but you should be getting a tons of flavor, and it should not have like really any bite whatsoever. And it should be really generous with the flavor, because they do something crazy where they take 2 different mash bills that are high rye components, and then they have 2 different yeast strains, and they blend them together at some point. Like, they're kind of secretive about how that all works, because they wanted to do something kind of interesting and special, but it works. What are you guys getting from it?
It's dude, it's great. It's super fruity. You can definitely taste the fruit notes in it for sure. But you also have that, like, you have the bite of the rye, but it wasn't like that high rye we were drinking before we started. It's definitely there, but there's not like a lingering burn that you get in the back of your mouth with the lower rye that we had. It's good. It's really good. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the burn that I'm getting is like up front. But once I set it back and drink it, no burn that I would traditionally expect with a rye.
Yeah, same here.
What do you think, Mike?
Exactly the same. Yeah, like exactly the same, pretty much. Like real up front, and then as it goes back, you really don't taste, or like doesn't burn as much. But it's
Did you get the
good.
fruit off of it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because the fruit, that was the most interesting thing to me. Like, the first time that I drank whiskey with Lester, like, I drank this whiskey and was like, bro, it's really just tasted like fruit. I've never had whiskey that, like, I was able to pick up on those kind of notes. So this is awesome.
Yeah,
because you would expect a little cinnamon, or like, some, like, a little of the hot stuff, right? Like something in there, but like fruit is far fetched to me when I think about whiskeys.
I taste the red fruit.
So are we off base or
no? That's great, man. You guys are getting it, man. I also get like a little like graham cracker, like biscuity. I could say all kinds of stuff, and you guys be like, "Oh yeah, I'm tasting that too." Just like power suggestion, right? Like, I'm the same, right? Like, I'm not tasting so your palate kind of plays tricks on you. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a really good bottle. I'm glad I have a backup of this.
Yeah, that Belle Mead is fire. Good.
FYRE or FIRE?
Whatever the young kids are doing these days, can't keep up.
You guys ever see those documentaries and stuff about the Fire Festival?
Yes, they're great.
We talked about it,
dude. It's such a train wreck. I love it.
It's amazing,
dude. It's so ridiculous. It's amazing.
I can't believe that they were able to trick that many people, dude. And then those people, dude, just sitting out like on a beach, baking in the sun, eating fucking prison food. Good for them,
dude. There's this bar. Did I take you guys to this when you were visiting? But there's a bar.
Was it the one with the dolls' heads all over the ceiling? Because that's the only thing I remember.
Okay, no, that's a different one. But there's a bar here in Chicago that they do for like months at a time. They do different themes. And the last 2 times I went, they did the Game of Thrones theme. But like after that, they did a fire festival theme, where it was just like there was sand on the floor. They had like pictures of like the dude that was running it, like Billy, whatever his name was. They had like Ja Rule, like all over the place. Dude, it was great.
No way.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Delilah's?
No.
So that is like a top whiskey bar in the country. I've been there. It's good. Yeah.
It's in Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. Actually, like I went in Chicago, I think the last time I went was 2014 with the wife for a weekend. And back then, like, you could still get like Pappy and stuff like that. I mean, it was expensive, but like you could still get it for a decent pour price at these bars, and it was widely available down there. I don't know if that's the case anymore, but that's where I got to try like all the Pappies basically. I spent hundreds of dollars that weekend just trying Pappy all over the place.
God, I wonder if they're still in business, because Chicago, from what I understand, like I have classmates and stuff that are there, and like from what I understand, downtown Chicago is fucking a ghost town, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody there, which I was kind of blown away by.
It definitely took a hit in the winter. Like the summer, I think a lot of places were able to like limp along because they could do a lot of the outdoor stuff. And like after like the initial wave had like kind of like calmed down a little bit, and like we realized weren't all gonna die. People started like, because I went to go see my sisters a few times in the city, and like, dude, there's just like, dude, people everywhere outside, just walking around, like enjoying the parks and stuff like that. But yeah, I can imagine like they had a rough winter. Like, so yeah, I hope they're still in business, or hope to survive. So,
because I the coolest place that I've ever been whiskey oriented, and I do not remember the name of it, so forgive me. I'm going to look it up here in a second. But it was in Portland, and it was a whiskey library right in Portland. I mean, I've never seen this much whiskey in a single place. I mean, it was called a whiskey library because you guys ever see that old cartoon, The Page Master? And it's like just libraries with like the ladders that go across the fucking. And bro, like it was like 2 stories high. It was crazy, like insane. And it was all fucking whiskeys all around the whole place with those ladders. And that's how the bartender was like novelty, you know, because the bartender would like climb the ladder and get their whiskey and pour. I was like, dude, this is fucking crazy. It was a trip.
That's very Portland.
Yeah, dude, Portland was a weird town, but very cool. Before the Chaz and Chop took over, whatever the fuck they call it.
No, that was Seattle.
Oh yeah, that's Seattle.
Yeah.
But Portland had something similar, I thought.
They tried to barricade, I think, their police into the police station and burn it down.
Yeah.
Oh, that was what it was. They quick treated the police station. That's right.
Yeah.
They burned it down. Yeah. This is it. This was it right here.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Dude.
Maybe I've been there. I've been to Portland.
Fucking nuts. It is called I don't even know if I can pronounce this. The Multnomah. 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 But well, yeah. Multnomah Whiskey Library. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I've been there.
Give it a Google. It's fucking look. It's awesome, dude. It's crazy.
So far, Belle Mead winning.
Yeah, that's your favorite so far.
Mm-hmm. Good shit.
Good. Yeah, so it's always tough to balance when you're trying to structure a whiskey tasting, like how you want the flavors to come play out, right? Like, because if I were to present these to you a different way, you might get a different experience out of it. You might be less excited about the entire thing if I give you like the best thing first, you know, whatever, you know what I mean? So it's always a little unnerving to try to gauge like how to properly curate the experience, you know.
Right,
especially with the power perception that you talked about. You know, if you give too many details or kind of say like you should experience this and everybody all of a sudden is going to experience it, versus if you're like, what do you taste, and then kind of get that out and then be like, okay, yeah, then, you know, that's pretty much what it was going for, but you know, there's also this and stuff like that.
You guys ready for number 4?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're gonna get a little wacky for 4 and 5. Yeah. So this is like your last normal whiskey that you just had. So hopefully you have a little bit left to spare for later for your stuff. All right. So number 4 is a distillery out of Colorado Springs. I'm a huge fan of theirs. Distillery 291. So this is what they call Bad Guy Bourbon. It's a 4-grain bourbon. So it's got both traditional flavor ingredients in there, wheat and rye.
Bad Guy Bourbon.
Okay. Yeah. This one's gonna punch you in the mouth at 61%.
Oh, 61.
Yep.
Ooh.
And
nobody's driving.
And we'll talk more about it after you guys get. So this one is a 1. Again, I would caution you to do what I asked you guys to do the first time, which is take a very little bit, acquaint yourself, let your mouth salivate, and then swallow it, exhale immediately, and then go from there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can smell it. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I can smell it, and I have a rocks glass.
Oh yeah,
it's a very distinctive flavor profile. Like all of their whiskeys have a very strong flavor profile.
want some crackers or anything?
Sure.
Reset the flavor.
You'll have to reset after this, but everything else beforehand was pretty mild and tame compared to this. What do you guys think?
It's definitely got that kick, but it's good.
Yeah, it's the most different so far. Very very strong. I don't know. I'm gonna try bigger.
Yeah, try bigger taste here.
This one's pretty high in the viscosity flavoring or effect as well.
This one reminded me of number 2, the what was it, the single barrel one that we had at the beginning a little bit?
Yeah.
It's strong.
That had like a more even across the palate feeling too, like you kind of was just like spread throughout like my entire front and back of my tongue when I was tasting it.
This is an assault on your taste buds for sure.
It is, yeah. It hits you. It's like a punch in the mouth.
Yeah.
It's not bad though. It's good.
So some things that I get, and it's pretty characteristic of like almost all Distilly 291 products, is this like, it sounds bad, but it's actually really good to me. This artificial grape flavor, this grape cola nut, lots of baking spices. It's pretty characteristic of 291 whiskeys, whether it's just their pure rye, their bourbon.
I could taste like a very subtle grape flavoring, almost like a hint of like a wine flavoring, sort of.
Yeah. It's also very grain forward, like spirit forward. Reason being is because this is aged less than 1 year. I mean, if you look at the color, it's just outrageous. That's another thing about bourbons, unlike scotches, it's like they don't, bourbons are naturally colored. So how do they get that much color and that much flavor out of it? Well, one, they have a pretty unique distillation process. I think they call it like the El Paso County process, where they have this relationship with this brewery. The distiller of Distilly 291 was originally like a professional photographer in New York City, and after September 11th, he kind of like got jaded with the whole photography scene and living in a big city and all that, because I guess he had a big high-rise apartment near the Twin Towers and all this stuff. He had a family, whatever. Decided to get into distilling, and a buddy of his, or someone he got acquainted with in Colorado Springs, the owner of Bristol Brewing, got him his start, like helped him with his licensing and starting up the business, all that stuff. And he adds a little bit of IPA beer to his mash before he distills it. So that's like one unique thing he does, is he adds like an actual, because like distiller's beer is what you get after you ferment the grain, the soupy meal after a couple of days with the yeast you pitched in it. So like he adds beer to it, an IPA, and then he distills it, and then he puts it in smaller format barrels. So this is one that's aged typically in a 10, 15, or 25 gallon barrel, as opposed to a 53 gallon barrel, because the surface area is greater. It imparts more flavor. He also uses a high char. So most of these guys, there's different varying degrees of char, anywhere from 0 to 5 usually, right? 0 being no char, 5 being like super charred. Like, so most of these places do a 3 char. I think they do like a 4 or a 5 char on their stuff. Also, because they're from Colorado, they take aspen oak and they char that stuff. They like these little staves, and they, like, after a period of time, towards the end of the maturation process, whether that's like a year or 9 months or whatever they decide they're going to do, like 3 weeks or so beforehand, they'll put these aspen oak staves inside of the barrel, which amps up the flavor, makes it way sweeter. That's a way to impart flavor. artificially. Maker's Mark also does that nowadays. These guys have been doing that since 2010 or something like that. But Maker's Mark started doing that with their Maker's 46 and their Maker's Private Select stuff, maybe in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's how they get so much flavor out of such a short amount of time. And their stuff's great. They make a very heavy spirit as well, right? They distill to a very low proof, which means they have a lot more congeners in there. So, you have the heads, the hearts, and the tails, right? Or the feints, in Scotland is what they call it, right? It's like different levels of distillate, right? So as the temperature rises, typically you start getting distillate at 168, 170 degrees, something like that. That stuff that first comes off, that lighter alcohol, is going to be like your acetones and acetates, like very like methanol, right? Like that kind of stuff. So that stuff gets poured out basically. And then once they get to a gravity, the right kind of gravity, then they shift over to the hearts, right? And that's usually around 173 degrees is where you start getting ethanol. And then beyond like 179, 180 degrees, you start getting the heavier stuff, the fusel oils. And depending on how much you want to go into the feints, they call it, right? Because that's all drinkable. It's just got funky notes to it. Right. That adds character, though, to your whiskey, because you're not getting pure ethanol at that point. You're getting all kinds of weird little, they call them the congeners, right? Whatever you get out of the distillate as you're evaporating that ethanol from the grain. And at that point, it's spent grain, right? So they come out with a heavier distillate. It tastes really good. It's almost like their clear stuff is almost like a tequila, it seems like. Yeah, right, with all the flavor that they have in there. So it makes a really good Bloody Mary. Like or Bloody Maria, I guess you could call it, or whatever. But yeah, and this is what you get a year later. And that's crazy because no one's aging something for less than a year.
Yeah. That's
and getting this kind of flavor.
This thing is the heat on this.
Yeah.
When you hold it is very intense.
Yeah, it is.
It is no joke. This is very strong.
Where in Colorado is this distilled? Is it like high elevation?
Colorado Springs. So yeah, it's like 6,000 feet.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
Yeah. It's a very polarizing whiskey. I love it. I feel like if you like really flavor forward cask strength whiskeys, this is going to hit the mark. But even that, like, some people still don't like it. So, but I love this stuff.
It's definitely the most unique, I think.
Yeah.
Good. We got. Oh, have you ever had Maker's Mark Mint Julep?
I can't get over that heat.
No, man.
Yeah, it's one of the listeners' favorites. Apparently.
Yeah, where they
comment in the.
Oh, okay.
It's in the Twitch chat.
Okay, yeah. So that's like a pre-made cocktail, I think. I want to say so. It's going to be like in the 20% range or something like that. And it's a mint julep, but that is like the drink of the Kentucky Derby, like horse racing stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
Maker's Mark, also Woodford Reserve, are really, those two brands are really big for the Kentucky Derby season, because Woodford Reserve is in Versailles, Kentucky, which is right there where the horse race happens. And if you actually drive to Woodford Reserve, like, there's all these beautiful, like, I don't know what you call them, the champion breed, champion horse breeders, like, they're all there. So, like, you have beautiful stables and beautiful pastures and these majestic horses everywhere, and you're driving in this super photogenic scenery on your way to the distillery. And then, like, you get to the distillery and there's these beautiful, like, white cobblestone type, things all over the place and stuff. Like, they really curate the experience for you.
It sounds fucking awesome.
It's nice.
Yeah. That sounds. I've never been on a brewery tour. Like that. Not like that. I mean, not where. I'm riding through pastures with, award-winning fucking horses.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I've done is
Now,
the
if you go to Maker's
Anheuser-Busch.
Mark,
Saw the
yeah,
Clogdales. That's about it.
yeah.
Tried sales at the Anheuser-Busch one. So
If you go to Maker's Mark, that's in Laredo, Kentucky, and that is crazy because like the roads to get there are horrible. Like it's shitty. It's it's like two-way roads, but like it's really only meant for one. Like it's crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like not well maintained and stuff. I'm like, don't they know people fucking come from all over the world to come to Maker's Mark? Like everyone knows what Maker's Mark is. Why are the roads so bad down here? Like it's so dangerous to drive down here.
Yeah, it sounds like Montana.
Yeah.
Montana's the same way. They're like
people. Maker's Mark.
Yeah, people in Texas gotta love Texans. They'll how do you tell somebody's from Texas? They'll tell you. But Texans, they think they're cowboys. Nah, bro. Wyoming and Montana, they're the last of the cowboys. Like no rules out there, man. It's every person for themselves.
Do you think Montana's really like that still? I mean, everything I was looking at is like, it seemed like it's getting overrun.
It's starting to now, but it's like only the more denser population. Like Missoula, Bozeman, they're becoming more Californianized from all the people out. But like, dude, I'm telling you, you go to Western Montana, like where I was living in Yellowstone, like you go to Gardner, Montana, dude. It's just, dude, it's straight up like dudes that are ranchers. That's all they do. Like no one tells them what to do. They do whatever the fuck they want. I mean, these are guys that go poach on Yellowstone and they don't care. Like they're crazy.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, what is the Bourbon Trail? Is that what you were talking? Was that what you were describing before?
Yeah. So the Bourbon Trail it's not really a trail like you would think. Like Napa Valley is like an artery between Calistoga and Napa, and it's like a 40-mile stretch. Like it's not like that. So basically, the Bourbon Trail. You look at Kentucky. You look at Louisville, which is like on the west side, and you look at Lexington, which is on the east side of Kentucky, and you take a shotgun and blast birdshot, and it's just peppered around there. There's no like cohesive way to get to everywhere you want to get to. All right. All right. Like it's gonna be, I mean, you can get to a couple of distilleries, you can get to 3 or 4 distilleries in a day, but it's like a sport if you're doing that. You really got to plan it out.
That's a great description of that.
Yeah. So yeah, but most of them are going to be local. Like if you go to Louisville, they have all these urban experiences. So Jim Beam is in Claremont, Kentucky, which is like maybe 30-40 minutes south of Louisville, something like that. And that's the original, still house. But you can have Jim Beam urban still house experience in downtown Louisville. Same thing. Heaven Hill is going to be in Bardstown, Kentucky, which is just east of Claremont. That's the hub for a lot of places like Willett and Heaven Hill and a couple others. You can have like the Evan Williams experience. Evan Williams is also made by Heaven Hill in downtown Louisville. So you can just go to Louisville and have some experiences there, and then you can go to Lexington and go to Versailles or Woodford. You can go to Frankfurt, and that's where you'll find Buffalo Trace. So
that's hilarious. They give you a bourbon passport, and you get stamps at each distillery.
Yeah, so actually, awesome. Buffalo Trace is a company that's has opted out because they don't want to buy into the bourbon passport experience. So you can't get a stamp from Buffalo Trace.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like we're fucking balling. We don't need to pay into this market bullshit. Like, yeah, we're just not gonna do it, right? Like, everyone knows who we are, and if they don't, fuck them because we're making tons of money. Yeah,
that's crazy. I would have never expected that. I figured they'd be all about it.
See, I always knew.
They have 2 passports. They have like the commercial, like macro distillery passport, and then they have a craft distillery passport. So a craft distillery passport's going to have like Old Pogue, which is like north of Lexington. It's going to have New Riff Distillery, which is also north of Lexington. They make some fantastic stuff. I almost thought about adding their products in here because they taste like a macro distillery, like a Buffalo Trace, but they're way small. So that's like very impressive. Also, good segue. Our next whiskey is also on the craft distillery passport for bourbon, and this is MB Roland. So I lived like 15 minutes away from this place for a while. They were just on the border of Kentucky and Tennessee. And so I got really close with them. They also had an amazing distillery experience. I used to be able to email the distillery ops manager, and she hooked me up with a distiller's tour, which they offer to the general public like once a month or something, or at least they used to. And in this distiller's tour, they take you on the traditional tour, but they take more time with you, and they make sure that it's either the owner or the distillery ops manager that takes you on it, so that's someone who can really answer all your geeky questions if you have those. And then when you go into the warehouse, you have no less than, say, 3 to 5 tastings out of the barrel thieving. Like, they just talk to you and say, hey, what would you like to try? We got this crazy kind of whiskey that we've been experimenting with. We got this super old stuff. What do you want to try? And they'll just take the bungs out of everything and just start barrel thieving and just giving it to you right from the barrel. It's an incredible experience. So much fun. And then you go into their visitor center, and you have their traditional tasting. And they also make moonshines and flavored moonshines that are very high quality with like real ingredients in them and all that, real fruit, real spices, all that kind of stuff. And they make some really interesting stuff. So like you get to try like 10 or 15 things in there, and then the massive, like the mega pours of barrel thieving, like it's amazing. It's a great experience. It's really nice. And back then, I don't know what it is now, but a couple of years ago, it was like $20. And they give you a glass to take home. So it's like, it's a no-brainer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Like what a deal.
Pays for itself.
It was such an incredible experience. It's amazing. I did it multiple times. I brought some people along with me. So much fun. So MB Roland, what's very interesting about them, so it's an Air Force veteran that started it, like Tom Kawasowski or something like that. His wife's name is Mary Beth Roland. Her maiden name is Roland. He thought that sounded better, so he decided to go with that. He bought it. It's an Amish.
It does sound better.
It's an Amish farm that he bought, and they distill whiskey there. And they started with smaller format barrels, but now they're doing more stuff in the 53-gallon barrels, and they're aging that for at least 4 years because that's really the sweet spot. What I'm presenting to you is one of the first, a couple years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, one of the first 4-year-old full format barrels that they released as a single barrel product. So I'd say 3 years ago, 2018 is when it was. Another distinctive thing about them is that they use white corn instead of yellow corn because it's more prevalent around them. White corn. White corn is also a little bit more expensive. And it's supposed to be a little sweeter, but this is very distinctive because of that white corn. It tastes pretty different than most bourbons that you'll have. So give that a taste if you haven't already.
White corn, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, it has a bite, but compared to the distillery 291, it's not nearly as in your face as that one.
So this one's 58.9%, so it's just like a point or two off from distillery 291.
Wow, I feel like this is a lot smoother.
You can pick up the differences in the white corn, right?
I feel like I can, just from the sense that like.
It's like a softer, like sweet.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have described it as sweet, but I definitely would have described it as softer. I guess sweet maybe would be a good way to describe it. You're doing that Jedi mind trick on me again.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple reasons why you might want to categorize it as sweet. One of them is the white corn. Which they tout as like a big thing, and it is a big deal. Like not many distilleries use white corn. It's a little bit more expensive, and it's a little more unique than using yellow corn. even though like we're all accustomed to yellow corn and we like that flavor profile. White corn is just a unique thing. Secondly, they're one of a few distilleries that use like a boutique cooperage for their barrels. So they use a company called Kelvin Cooperage. So most people use a company called Independent Stave. Independent Stave, they have a wide variety of products. They can do high-end barrels and stuff like that. But Independent Stave, usually they're like air drying their wood for less than 6 months or around 6 months. I mean, I don't want to speak for the company. I don't think anyone's gonna say, but like that's roughly what I understand Independent Stave does by and large. And Jim Beam and Buffalo Trace, they all buy a bunch of barrels from Independent Stave. Kelvin Cooperage does a lot of things by hand. They don't produce as many barrels, and they specialize in making wine grade barrels. So what does that mean? It means that it's air dried. The wood is air dried for 18 months, the oak. And with that, you just have like a better quality wood to submit to fire.
Sorry, the yolk.
Oak.
Yes. Sorry.
And then they do a high toast on the barrel. So before, kind of like if you've had a cigar before and you've seen someone who fusses over cigars, usually if you're using a match or something, you'll bring the match to the tobacco to kind of like wick out some of the oil, right? And kind of like dry it out a little bit so that when you bring your matchstick closer or your second matchstick, it's ready to light, kind of like kindling or something like that. So with barrels, they often do the same kind of thing, but for a lower period of time. So with a high toast barrel, with wine barrels, they typically only toast, they don't char. They do a high toast, which means it gets deeper into the recesses of the wood. So if you were to look at the cross-section of an oak stave, more of it's going to be toasted.
Right.
And then after that, they char it. Right. So they can char it for less time because it's like dried out and they get the char they want, the grade char they want. And what happens is during these temperature fluctuations in the warehouse, the seasons in Kentucky, hot, cold, humid, not humid, you get the whiskey coming in and out of the wood, right? Like it's breathing. And it can go really deep in the wood. And the more toast you have, that means the more caramelized sugars your whiskey is going to have to interact with, versus a lower toast barrel is going to have less depth of like those caramelized sugars, even though like it'll be going into greener wood, even though it's not really green because it's been at least air dried for at least 6 months, which is par for the course. Again, they go the extra mile doing 18 months, and then they do this high toast. Right. So like this is a more expensive barrel that they're using in the hope that they're yielding a more flavorful.
Okay. So you get the sweeter flavors from these barrels that have these kind of like deeper toasts, more caramelized wood.
It's like increasing the surface area, like it's increasing more areas of like it's like villi in your intestines, like your intestines have villi to make up for limited amount of like surface area by having deeper recesses where it can absorb more or has longer contact with it.
But you get spice because it's also another high rye bourbon.
Yeah.
You can get that it's got a heavy burn.
Another thing they do is they don't cut any of their whiskeys. So they do still proof for barrel entry. So like I told you, most distilleries distill at or above 125 proof, right? And then cut down with water. They distill up to like 114, 115 proof, like off the still, their second run. And then they put that right in the barrel with no water. Okay. So that's pretty distinctive as well. Like no one else really does that. And why that's important too, it's interesting because like the interaction between the whiskey distillate, the water, and the wood, some argue the lower the proof that the whiskey goes in at, the more flavorful the whiskey is going to be at an earlier age. So it going in at 110, 114 proof it should arguably be better than something that's going in at 125 proof.
Oh, okay.
Because, yeah. there's a little bit more water content, and that water is grabbing that flavor before the alcohol does, basically.
Yeah.
The alcohol strips that flavor from the wood, but the water really takes to it. And then during oxidation, which is something you can't manufacture by shrinking the barrels, right? Which is what you don't get out of a distillery 291 whiskey. That oxidation that you get from those esters and polymers breaking apart and then reassembling in different ways, that's what gives you that flavor profile that you get after years and years or decades of that you can't simulate that.
Right.
You can get more color, you can get more forward flavor, but you're not going to get that oxidative restructuring of flavors until years. You can't artificially manufacture that until now some distilleries, I guess, like entrepreneurial craft wacky distilleries, are playing with like the idea of pressurizing whiskeys and stuff like that to try to like simulate conditions that would accelerate the aging process. I don't know much about that, but I've heard of that occurring. But up to now, I don't think anyone has cracked the code on how to make a good well-aged whiskey in a 24-hour period or something like that. You know, like what people are like, it's like alchemy, right? Like people are trying to make this happen.
Right. That's why I was asking about the distillery 291, like at what altitude they're at, because like since they're at a higher altitude, I'm wondering like if the lower pressure has something to do with like how they can get that color and flavor into like a batch of bourbon so quickly.
That's a good point.
No clue.
So what do you guys think of
If
this
it's possible,
whiskey?
someone will figure it out.
Somebody will figure it out.
I like this way better than the one previous.
Cool.
Yeah, I think this was much more my speed.
All right, so let's do the last one since we only have 13 minutes left here. Unless you guys go long.
Let's do it.
We can go a little long.
We'll try to stay on time for the mercy of whoever's editing. But other than that, we can go long.
Okay,
because it ain't me this week.
Yeah, it ain't me. So
At least me.
We can go as long as we want.
All right, so this last one is kind of a wild card. So I want you guys to try it first before I say anything.
Dude, I thought 4 and 5 were wild cards. 6 is the wild.
Well, this is bringing us back. This is bringing us back to a macro distillery, but it's in a style and a flavor profile that you wouldn't expect from this distillery. I'll tell you the distillery after you try it, and you're gonna be like, "No way, probably."
I'm gonna guess it's Jack Daniels.
Yeah,
Jim Beam.
Yeah, Jim Beam.
Bacardi. Give this one a nose too.
Yeah.
There's a butterscotch sweetness that you get from the nose that's pretty pleasing.
It's got
there is butterscotch smell, yeah.
Yeah. Also get like a stewed banana, kind of like banana foster, kind of creme brulee, kind of.
I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
It's more like on the banana side.
Yeah, that's more like a yeasty character.
Now I'm getting.
I can't believe you can pick those out. Like I couldn't put a word
Yeah.
to it, dude.
Yeah.
And then when you said it, I was like, "Damn, that is."
The Jedi mind trick, dude. Now I'm smelling bananas.
That's it. Dude, it's the Jedi mind trick, dude.
Bananas you are smelling.
All right, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers, everybody. Here's Sylvester on the last one. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah.
We
Cheers,
appreciate
buddy.
it.
Yeah, thanks, Lester. This is great.
My pleasure, man. This is the height of my experience. This is when I really enjoy whiskey the most.
Really good. I can taste. I mean, I don't know if it's because you suggested it, but a little bit of butterscotch caramely.
Yeah.
But also like fruit notes as well.
Like warming baking spices too. I feel like it's swelling like little waves of these
Yeah.
sweet characters.
Yeah,
It's
and
like
then
a flaky character
lot.
to it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I like this a lot.
Yeah.
And as you swallow it, you get more of that rolling bite or
Yeah.
burn. As it, like kind of starts on the back, goes to the front of the tongue. Yeah, it's really good.
I'm still getting banana.
Yeah.
I'm still getting a lot of banana, dude. Ton of banana.
Definitely
There's always
banana
somebody in the
bread,
banana
like on
stand.
the back end. Yeah.
That is the signature profile for this distillery. Anytime I've done a blind tasting, I can pick out this distillery, even their high-end offerings, because of that note.
The banana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like Heaven Hill has like an almondy note. Jim Beam has a peanut note.
How often are you doing blind tastings? Hold on.
I used to do them. I don't do them as much anymore. But when I have bros around that like come over my place.
Oh, you'll do one for fun.
I'll do it for fun.
Okay,
Yeah. Well, awesome. I'll have my wife Kathy do them for me, so I don't see them. I'm just like, hey, these are the ones I want to try.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Really cool.
I was like, damn, dude, fucking blind tasting, dude. No, that does sound fun. Yeah, dude, you need to throw together a whiskey party, man. Fuck.
God damn you, COVID.
I'll fly out to New York for that for sure.
Good, man.
Yeah.
So, you guys ready? So, what do you think of this? And then what was your favorite overall?
I like this a lot, but I still think my favorite was the Belle Mead.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Belle Mead would probably go down the books for me for this one as well, dude. That was really, really good.
Nice.
I would say either this one, the last one, or the first one. I like the vanilla in the first one.
You like the Weller 12? Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. That is a pretty big component of Weller 12 is that signature, like very like vanilla extract kind of. So this is Jack Daniels.
Oh, and I didn't look at the list prior.
This is their heritage barrel. So it comes to like Jack Daniels above Gentleman Jack, which is garbage in my opinion. Beyond, it's like $40 a bottle and it's still 40% alcohol. I'm like, I'm not fucking paying. For 40% alcohol, I'm not paying $40. It's garbage.
Right.
You know, anyways.
I agree. Now that you taught me, I agree.
Anyways, so their single barrel offerings, right? They have a single barrel rye, and they have a single barrel cask strength. Those are all phenomenal. The single barrel cask strength is like $60, and then the single barrel rye and the single barrel are both like in the $47, $50 range. Those are fantastic. You get a lot of the banana out of those. This being the heritage bottle, there's a couple different things that I've already spoken about that they decided to do to this bottle, or this, offering in particular. One, high toast barrel, okay, much like MB Roland would have done, right? So it's like a special barrel. Two, they decided to put this in instead of doing like the 125 proof or whatever they do, right? They don't do like much less than that. They put it in at 100 proof. Ooh. So much lower proof. It's very costly to do that, right? Especially with the kind of barrels they have their own cooperage, so it's a little cheaper. But like the kind of barrels you have and all that, like the more volume you're putting in, right? Because like you need more barrels, right? Like you yield a certain amount of distillate from your second run. You cut it with water. That's more volume. The most expensive part of making whiskey, besides aging it, is the barrel.
Right.
So they need more barrels when they're cutting this shit down from wherever it's distilled from to 100 proof.
I don't want to break your train of thought, but did you talk about how expensive the barrels are? Because I know you talked about the process, but like
so as I understand it, a lot of these barrels are going to fluctuate between like $300 to $750, $800 a barrel.
That's insane, dude. And like somebody like a big place like this could have how many barrels within their?
Yeah. So Jack Daniels, as I understand it, will have like 20,000 barrels in their warehouses, and they have like 100 warehouses. They have like, it's ridiculous.
That's insane.
That's
no.
It's actually, if you think about it, like to get that amount of oak and to turn that amount of oak into lumber that's not only like usable lumber is for coopering. And then like if you think about it that from there you have to get all those individual planks that can be used for coopering. Then you have to have Cooper sit there, and a Cooper inspects every single plank of wood that is handed to him and constructs the Coopers indivially by hand.
Yeah, so cut it. They cut the staves. They have to steam bend everything. Like it's like,
and they bend it like it's It's a crazy
even
process.
The automated processes, like they still have to have people around to do stuff. So yeah. So this is all the magic that Jack Daniel's does, which is add a character for such a massive distillery to focus this much. And this is what they can produce when they give a shit about what the customer's actually tasting. Although you will get the banana note from the Black Label number 7. You will get it from that.
Interesting.
I've had Black Label number 7 in the last couple of years. I'm like, okay, I'm getting that, So you can appreciate that for what it is for the price point. But if you've got the means, then get something better.
So, anything better.
They make really tasty stuff. Although I prefer George Dickel over Jack Daniels. George Dickel. So George Dickel's characteristic note, right? Jack Daniels is like that stewed banana from the yeast. George Dickel, right, is another Tennessee whiskey about 40 minutes away from Lynchburg, Tennessee, where Jack Daniels is. There's, if you guys remember Flintstone vitamins.
Yeah.
When you were a kid. So it's that Flintstone vitamin, like sweet chalky minerality. You get that from George Dickel. And I love that. I love that.
You love it? Damn.
I mean, it's not like the only flavor I'm getting, obviously, right? But you're getting a hint of that. And I love that character. It's very unique.
That's hilarious. That's fucking awesome.
That's awesome.
Hopefully just not the cherry one, because I didn't like that like red one.
No, that was not good.
That's my least
Tastes
favorite.
like medicine, straight up.
Yeah, straight up medicine.
Yeah,
like my least favorite
cough,
one, dude.
like cough medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other vitamin I could get with.
What is your favorite bourbon? Like, what's your like? I don't know. Either your favorite one or maybe what's your like go-to like.
Yes, the ones that I think the ones that I've drank the most, the bottles I've drank through the most in my time of collecting and drinking have been Maker's Mark Cask Strength, Woodford Reserve, just the normal Woodford Reserve, and Booker's. Probably the three. I drink a lot of stuff, but probably the ones that I have repurchased multiple times more than others have been those three. So I think less so Maker's Mark Cask Strength, but certainly Booker's is up there as one of my favorite whiskeys, and that's a high proof, like 6 to 8 year old offering from Jim Beam. Matter of fact, I had the opportunity. I bought it in the secondary market, but for a pretty good price. I had one of the first releases of Booker's, which happened to be in my birth year. And I bought that, and I opened it this year, and it was fantastic.
Damn.
So this shit was distilled in 1979.
Damn.
And released in 1987. So this was the year. This was like a year and a half prior to Booker's becoming an actual commercial label that was on the shelf. So Booker No, the guy who created Booker's, this was like his choice bourbons from the center cut of the warehouses, essentially, that he preferred, this flavor profile uncut, and he would give it to his friends, family, and then later he started giving it as bennies to distributors, people within the industry that were taking care of Jim Beam and doing high volume sales, all that stuff. He would send these out as like Christmas gifts, basically, or shell them out during Christmas parties and stuff. So I got a bottle of his stash before people were like, hey, start bottling this for the market.
Wow.
So yeah, that was an amazing bottle.
That's pretty cool.
It's just incredible.
Yeah.
As old as you.
Yeah. So one thing I did for my kid was he's 3.5, but what I did was for his birth year, I bought a bunch of shit that was released around the time of his birth, and I'm holding on to it. Like there's like 8 or 9 bottles, so that like as he grows, hopefully he likes whiskey. If not, then I'll fucking drink it, right? But like celebration bottles for high school, college graduation, whatever, whatever he's doing, getting a house, getting married, whatever he's doing, just those special occasions will have something to include a Booker's that was released in the season of his birth.
That's awesome.
No, that's really cool.
Awesome.
That's epic, dude.
That's a good idea. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's anything better that you could like, I'm proud of you, son. You just have a glass of whiskey, like that, dude. That's badass. Because I mean, what else are you gonna do? I mean, buy him a car or something. Like, whatever. It's not.
No, it's like
it's just a material item, but like,
I bought this when you were born, and I've been holding on to it.
Right, exactly. Like that is the thing.
That's the drink.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not I took care of it like I took care of you.
This was released when you were born. Yeah.
I've blown argon into this. Keep it fresh.
Well, no, those are sealed, right? Like I'm not opening those until it's the day of. But yeah, so I did that, and I was happy to do that. So I bought a Booker's Birth Year bottle, and then if you're familiar with scotches, Bunnahabhain is a distillery out of Islay that does not peat their scotch. It's like the only one that doesn't peat their scotch. I got a 1987 Bunnahabhain that was released in 2018. Damn. So it's a 31-year-old scotch.
Wow.
And I actually got it for a good price. So a 30-year-old scotch should go for like $1,500, $2,000. I got this bottle for $350.
That's fucking.
There you go.
It's awesome.
This Booker's that I got, it was not collector's grade because it didn't come like Booker would put it in a little like sack. The sack was not a part of it. Also the wax was cracked, right? Like you could tell it was still sealed. It still had the fibrous resin meant to seal the cap on, but like the wax runs all the way down the bottle neck, and the wax was cracked and some chunks of it was off. But I didn't care about it being collector grade because I just meant to drink it. So I was going to open it eventually. So I got that for like $600, which is a lot of money for a whiskey. But that same bottle now, if I wouldn't have opened it, I probably could have sold it for $2,000.
Dang. Wow.
Yeah.
That's more important to me to drink it though. So like what I did was I opened it. I had a pour of it, like a 1 ounce pour of it. And then I took these little Boston rounds, right, that we have. And I filled them all up, like 2 ounce pours of it. So, that yielded like 11 or 12 of those. So now I don't have to worry about it oxidizing. I don't have to worry about any of that. I can just reach out, every birthday for the next decade or every couple birthdays for the next several decades and have one of those.
Yeah.
And I kept it.
Awesome.
No, it's awesome, man. That's definitely legit, dude. You're making me look at buying booze in a whole new light.
Yeah,
I know, right?
Go to the liquor store, put the money on the counter, go home, get drunk. Now, dude, you're plotting out the rest of your life. Fucking birthdays on how you're gonna drink your fucking $700 bottle of booze. Dude, I love it. That's sick though. No, it is awesome, man. I would like to buy an expensive bottle of booze like that at some point, dude, and bust it out on occasion.
So what I would say is at some point come over to my place, try all my booze, so you really can drill in on the flavor profiles you most prefer, the brands you most prefer. And then from there you can make an informed decision and make a good purchase
and actually get something legit.
Yeah, because then you're on the mark. That was the problem when I first got into whiskey, was like no one was as hardcore about it as I was, so I couldn't like split bottles with people and stuff. So like I didn't have like, I really got into whiskey like towards the end of the time I lived in Albuquerque, which wasn't really much of a whiskey town. And then I moved to north of Nashville, like 45 minutes away from Nashville in Clarksville, Tennessee. Like there was nothing there. So like they had great liquor stores but terrible bars. So I just had to go and buy bottles so I could taste the shit.
Yeah.
Because I had to make my own bar basically. And I took all my discretionary money that I had to blow on whatever else. I just started buying whiskey all the time because I couldn't get anyone else to like go in on it with me. And that's how I acquired so many. Now I kind of know what my flavor preferences are, so I could really pare down. But I have all that shit, so I'm just gonna drink through it eventually. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, for sure.
So,
right.
And then other things I like because I still hunt for whiskey. Like I'll go to obscure places and be like, okay, let me go find whiskey here, see if there's anything good. And if I find something good, I'll buy a bunch of it and stock up.
Yeah. No, it's smart. I mean, shit, especially if you can flip them.
If you can flip them, yeah. So yeah, I told Rob like I did flip some because I was like getting some anxiety about the amount of whiskey I had when I moved from Seattle to here. Excuse me. So I took like 20 bottles that I knew like they were not worth the money, right? Like what they were worth secondary. Like they were going to be great to drink. But like, yeah, so I took those and I sold them on the secondary market. And I think, I probably had all in like $600-700 invested in those whiskeys, and I flipped it for like probably $3,000.
It's a good profit, man. I mean, it's a good profit especially for just, holding on to them and just let them hang out on your shelf. I mean, like you can't.
Yeah. Don't tell Gary V. We don't want him to ruin the whiskey market.
Yeah, Gary V will be on Facebook and he'll be letting everybody know this is how you get rich. But all right, dudes, I think we are pretty much out of time. So huge shout out to Lester. Soon, hopefully, we'll be drinking a whiskey of his. He'll hopefully be brewing something for us. I think this was definitely one of our best episodes we've done. Certainly the most robust. And I don't know, I had fun, and I hope everybody out there listening had fun because we had a ball doing it for you. So thank you again, Lester, for making this happen. I mean, dude, we had to ship. Lester had to ship samples across the United States, and then also travel to Hell's Kitchen, which I know was much out of his way to record this. So I don't know, excellent night, man. So appreciate it. Thanks for throwing it on, dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was my pleasure. Really had a good time. Maybe we'll do this again for Scotch sometime.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. It's in the books. We're doing Scotch.
Doing it for Scotch.
We're doing it live.
We'll see what your viewership thinks about this one. We'll wait a little while. So, period,
Yeah. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead is what I say, no matter what.
Yeah.
That's it, dude.
I appreciate thanks for coming on and doing this. This is awesome, and I'm sure our viewers are gonna love it just to get a different take and just how to even get started in this. Like if you wanted to do something like this, it's a great way to even know just how to get your foot in the door. So appreciate it, and I think the Scotch one would be awesome too. So we'll have to figure out I want to do that one down the road. But we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I mean, like I said. Or like they've said, thanks again, Lester. Definitely have a new appreciation for bourbon. I'm like you. Like when I get into something, I go all in. So now I'm gonna be annoying the people that I know with oh, you got to try this if you like bourbon. Like all this stuff is gonna I'm just like a sponge, gonna take all this in and regurgitate it. So yeah, appreciate it, sending it across the country to all of us. So definitely have you on again and. Love to explore something like Scotch because for me, that just tastes straight up like smoke.
It's better than just smoke, dude. But all right, everybody out there, we are going to have some more guests lined up, so stay tuned. We will have more in the future. Hopefully, we'll have the Scotch episode in the future. Be on the lookout. We should have a fellow podcaster coming on within the next few weeks. And as always, thank you very much for tapping in. We appreciate you. And we'll see you next.
Thank you for listening to Subtle Propaganda. We hope you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media. You can find our podcast anywhere podcasts are uploaded, which include our pre- and post-show. We will be live next week at 7 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to tell us how wrong we were in the comments. See you next time.